The moment Wine walked out, an unsettling emptiness settled over the house. Jungkook strode into their bedroom only to find it stripped of her presence. The closet door hung slightly open, revealing the vacant space where her clothes once were. His jaw clenched. She really left. Something twisted in his chest, but he shook it off. He turned toward the bathroom, deciding a cold shower might clear his thoughts. The icy water cascaded over him, yet it did little to wash away the strange restlessness creeping into his mind. Later, laying in bed, he reached for his phone almost instinctively. His fingers hovered over her name in his contacts before he switched to her profile. He clicked on their message thread, empty, silent. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, but the words never came. If she wants to leave, let her. He muttered under his breath, tossing the phone aside. I won't go after her. She will come by herself. But the tightness in his chest didn't ease. Once point of view, the warmth of the soup spread through her as she took another careful sip. Her fingers wrapped around the ball. Across from her, Taehyung watched her intently, his nervous energy making him get slightly. How's the soup? I just made it in a hurry. She lifted her gaze, meeting his expectant eyes, and smiled faintly. It's really good, trust me. Relief flickered across his face, and for a moment he looked proud. But Wine couldn't shake the weight in her chest, and Theung noticed. He always did. Without hesitation, he reached across the table and took her hand gently. The warmth of his touch startled her, making her tremble. Wine, sometimes it's okay to let go, especially when someone refuses to see your worth. Her throat tightened. She swallowed the lump forming there, gripping the bowl as if it could ground her. But what will I tell my baby who is his or her father? It's like he doesn't even care. He has not called once. Her voice cracked, the pain pressing into her chest. He's happy with his girlfriend, isn't he? The thought made her feel unbearably small. Theung exhaled sharply, his heart twisting at the sight of her tears. Without thinking, he pulled her into a warm embrace, his arms wrapped around her, holding her as if he could shield her from the pain. Don't cry, Wine. It hurts me too, more than you will ever know. His voice was low, laced with an emotion so raw that it struck her deep. For a moment, she let herself sink into the comfort of his embrace, but the ache in her heart was relentless. I want to disappear, but I can't because of this. Her trembling hand moved over her stomach, the weight of responsibility anchoring her to reality. And then the tears came, fast and unstoppable. Tim tightened his hold on her, his voice turning desperate. Don't say things like that. There are people who care for you, who love you deeply even when you don't see it. She blinked up at him, her lips parting slightly. His thumb brushed away the streaks of tears on her cheek, his gaze filled with something unspoken yet powerful. A moment passed before he sighed, glancing at the clock. It's already 11 p.m. You must be exhausted. Come on, I will show you your room. He stood pulling her up gently, guiding her through the hall until they reached a cozy, well prepared room. Rest, Wine, you deserve it. She stepped inside, and as the door closed softly behind her, she realized this was the first time in a long while that she felt safe. The next day, Jungkook stood in front of the mirror, fixing his cufflinks. His brows furrowed as he glanced around the room. Where is my tie? Wine, where the hell is my tie? Silence. He turned around, expecting to see her walk in with that usual annoyed, obedient expression. holding his tie in her delicate hands, but no one came. And then it hit him. She was gone. His jaw clenched, fingers curling into fists. The room felt emptier than ever, suffocating in its silence. He grabbed another tire from the drawer, yanking it around his collar with frustration before storming out. He left home without eating anything. At the office, the day dragged on, and Jungkook's mood worsened with every passing hour. His employees bore the brunt of his frustration, slammed files, harsh words, his temper barely in check. By the time the clock struck 8:30 p.m., the entire office was walking on eggshells. That's when Minji strolled into his office like she owned the place. She smiled before settling onto his lap, wrapping her hands around his neck. I didn't have dinner yet, let's go out. Jungkook barely reacted. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere he didn't want to admit. A thought nagged at him. Irritatingly persistent. She never even asked if I eat. She only cared about herself. His fingers tightened around the pen in his hand. Take my car keys and wait for me inside. I will come after finishing this file. Minji grinned, kissing his cheek before snatching the keys and running off like an excited child. The parking lot, 9:35 p.m. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair as he approached his car. He was exhausted, his head pounding with frustration, but the moment he opened the car door, his breath hitched. There in the back seat was Minji, straddling another man. Their lips were barely apart, her hands roaming over him like she had done with Jungkook so many times before. Something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he grabbed her hair and yanked her out of the car, making her stumble onto the pavement. Minji, startled at first, quickly regained her composure and scoffed. She dusted off her dress and crossed her arms. What does it look like? I got bored, Jungkook. His nostrils flared, whey coursing through his veins. Bored, you were the one clinging to me like a damn leech every day. She chuckled, stepping closer, her tone turning mocking. Come on, Jungkook, do you really think I was only yours? His hands trembled. He had been so blinded by her, so consumed in her presence, that he had never once thought she would betray him. You used me. Minji rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be so dramatic. Look, I will be honest. He is richer than you. I like money. Jungkook and you were just convenient. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. I gave you everything. I made you my priority, and this is what I get in return. Minji smirked. Oh, please, you were not even that good at keeping me entertained. Your wife, now she was loyal. Too bad you threw her away for me. Her words struck like a bullet to his chest. His wife, the one who cooked for him, cared for him, stood by him despite everything, the one he ignored, belittled, pushed away, she had been there for him. While Minji had only been playing with him all along. His fingers twitched, aching to break something, anything, but instead he stepped back, his face darkening. We are done. Minji scoffed. Oh, are we? His gaze was ice cold. You're never mine to begin with. Without waiting for her response, he drove back home, leaving her standing there with an irritated pout. Jungkook slammed the front door shut, his breathing uneven. His chest ached, but it wasn't from anger. It was something heavier, something unfamiliar. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. That's when he felt it. something warm sliding down his cheek. He pulled his hand away, staring at the moisture on his fingertips. Tears! Jungkook Joon, the man who never cried, was crying. For the first time in his life, he felt guilty. He had lost the only person who ever truly loved him, and the worst part, she wasn't coming back. 5 months later, not a single call, not a single message, nothing. 5 months had passed, and Jungkook had not tried to reach her. It was as if she had never existed in his life. But still, he was different. Through every breakdown, every moment of doubt, he had been there. He took care of Wine in ways no one ever did. Making sure she ate on time, took her vitamins, and never felt alone. To him, Wine was his first priority. Now she was almost 6 months pregnant. The slight swell of her belly was proof of the life growing inside her, a reminder of the past she had left behind. Tonight, as she sat on the couch, absent-mindedly rubbing her stomach, Taehyung suddenly spoke. Wine, marry me. Her breath hissed. She turned to look at him, eyes wide. Taehyung, I'm sorry. I know you have done so much for me, but if this is just pity, then I won't let you pity me. He immediately shook his head, leaning forward to take her hands in his. No, no, Wine, it's not like that. I fell for you from the very start. Her lips parted slightly in shock. My mom never liked you. When I told her I wanted to marry you, she forced me to leave for Australia. That's why I never got to confess. And you got married with Jungkook, but I swear I have loved you all along. She stared at him, her vein blurring with unshed tears, her heart clenched at his words and the sincerity in his eyes, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. A few moments passed in silence before she finally spoke. Will you come with me tomorrow to Jungkook's house? Taehyung's face darkened at the mention of his name. Why do you need to go there? She hesitated before answering. I just need to take something from there. His jaw clenched slightly. There is no need, just tell me what it is. I will buy it for you. Her eyes welled up again as she shook her head. You can't buy it, Theo. It's my mother's necklace. She gave it to me before she died. It's the only thing I have left of her. The moment he saw her tears, he sighed, wrapping his arms around her protectively. Okay, okay, we will go. We will get it back. She nodded against his chest, gripping his shirt tightly. Tomorrow she would have to face the place she once called home and the man she once loved. The next day, Wine and Taeyong arrived at Jungkook's house. Something immediately fell off. The front door, it was open. Wine's heart pounded in her chest. Jungkook had never been the type to leave his house unlocked. It wasn't like him. This is strange. He never leaves the door open. Theo placed a protective hand on her lower back. Stay behind me. I don't like this. But she didn't listen. Instead, she stepped inside. The familiar scent of the house now mixed with something rotten, sweat, and something else she couldn't place. As they made their way toward the bedroom, the hallway was eerily silent. Theo flicked on the lights, and that's when Wine saw it. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as a sharp scream left her lips. There on the bed lay Jungkook, but he wasn't the man she had once known. His hair was overgrown, tangled in messy waves. His once perfectly sculpted face was hidden beneath an unkempt beard. his body frail, exhausted, barely clinging to consciousness. His hands were trembling, his veins slightly visible under his pale skin. The room reeked of alcohol and something for Watt's regret. He looked nothing like the arrogant CEO she had left behind. Theung instinctively grabbed Vine's wrist, pulling her back. Don't go near him, he's not in his right mind. But Vine yanked his hand away, her heart clenching at the sight before her. She ran toward Jungkook, falling to her knees beside him. Jungkook, her voice trembled as she slightly patted his cheek. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and dazed before widening at the sight of her. And then tears. Raw, painful sobs tore from his throat as he looked at her, as if she were nothing but a dream slipping through his fingers. Please go, I know I will hurt you. His voice was hoarse, weak, filled with something that sounded a lot like it. He tried to push her away, his touch barely strong enough to move her. But then he stopped. His hand froze as his gaze dropped to her stomach, her baby bump. His lips trembled. Is that why swallowed hard and nodded? Jungkook's entire body shuddered, his fingers clenched into the bedsheet as his eyes darted between her face and her stomach. And then, almost like a man begging for air, he whispered, Can I? His voice broke. Can I touch just once? I want to hear the heartbeat. Wine hesitated. A part of her screamed that he didn't deserve this, that he was the one who had abandoned them first. But another part, one that still ached for the man she once loved, saw the brokenness in his eyes. And before she could stop herself, she nodded slowly, almost fearfully. Jungkook placed his trembling hand over her belly. The moment he felt even the faintest movement, a choked sob escaped him. His forehead pressed against her stomach as his entire body trembled. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. One's own eyes burned with tears. How did the mighty John Jungkook, the man she once feared, the man she once loved, end up like this? He was now nothing more than a shell of himself, even worse than a beggar. Behind him, Theo clenched his fists, watching everything in silence. His heart ached seeing Wine's tears, seeing the way she still cared, even after everything. But deep down, he knew Jungkook had already lost her, and this time it might be forever. Taeyong clenched his jaw, his patience wearing thin as he pulled Wine away from Jungkook. Jungkook's hand remained in the air, trembling as if reaching for something he had already lost. Please don't leave me. His voice was hoarse, cracking with every word. He coughed violently, his entire body shaking. Wine turned to Theung with bleeding eyes. Please, Theung, look at him. He needs a doctor. Theung's grip on her tightened. Wine, leave him. He will only hurt you again. But Wine shook her head, desperation in her voice. Let him. Please just try to understand. Just take him to the doctor. Theung exhaled sharply, rolling his eyes in frustration before finally giving in. Fine. With reluctance, he helped Jungkook to his feet, his body weak and lifeless, and carried him to the hospital. At the hospital, inside the ward, Theo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, rolling his eyes every time. Wine first over Jungkook. Jungkook lay on the hospital bed, his face pale, eyes dull, but his focus was only on Wine. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Wine let out a deep sigh, looking down at the man who had once broken her beyond repair. Then Jungkook reached for her hand, gripping it weakly. Wine, let's start over. I know I don't deserve you, but I love you. I was a fool to let you go. The room fell silent behind them. Taehyung stiffened. His fingers curled into fists, his heart racing with an unfamiliar fear. The fear of losing her. Unable to watch anymore, he turned and walked out of the ward. Inside, Wine looked at Jungkook, her eyes filled with sadness, not love. She gently pulled her hand away. Jungkook, I forgave you the day I walked out of your house, but I'm sorry I can't be with you anymore. Jungkook's face fell, devastation hitting him like a storm. But what about the baby? Wine's voice softened. I will manage, but I can't forget how you treated me. Her lips trembled as she forced out the final words. Stay happy, Jungkook. A single tear escaped his eye, but he swallowed back the pain. Will you at least let me see my child? She nodded, and then, without another word, she walked away, leaving him behind. Outside the ward, Wine stepped into the hospital corridor, her eyes searching for Taehyung. She found him sitting on a bench, his head hung low, fingers intertwined as if deep in thought. She called his name softly. Taehyung? His head snapped up, his eyes filled with uncertainty. You are here? Didn't you choose him? She smiled gently and sat beside him, wrapping her hands around his arm. How could I forget my Tete, the one who loves me so much? Theung froze. Moments ago, he had watched her care for Jungkook. He had been terrified that she would leave him, that she would go back to the man who once broke her. But now she was choosing him. But he wants to live with you. Wine shook her head, her voice firm. But I want to be with you. Theung's breath hissed. She reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his. And yesterday, when you proposed, I didn't respond, so now I want to say it properly. She took a deep breath, her heart racing. I love you, Theung. For a moment, he didn't move. Did she really just say that? His lips parted, eyes widening in disbelief before a slow, happy smile spread across his face. You don't know how scared I was that you would leave me. Wine chuckled softly, but I didn't. His heart swelled with emotions as he pulled her into a gentle hug. I love you too. The cold night breeze brushed against them, and without hesitation, Tim took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Let's go home. It's cold tonight.